we came up short, and we had a lot of good games and won a lot of games, but not being able to finish with the trophy in our hand was disappointing. Everything we did last year is gone. It's disappeared. If we come out here and don't put the work in, we'll go out and we won't be very good. We know it starts over and have to put that work in and have to find a way to be great again. And certainly offensively, we have a standard that we want to uphold of what we did last year, and I know the defense is trying to uphold theirs as well.
Now, I know that the Detroit Lions lost in the divisional round after being the 1 seed and having a 15-2 record in the 2024 NFL season, but you can make the argument that the Detroit Lions were the best overall team in the NFL last year. And in this NFL season preview, the first in the NFC North, we're going to be asking the question if the Detroit Lions are still the NFL's scariest team. They were league leading across the league, #1 points per game, averaging over 33 points per game. Total yards per game, ranked second in total yards per game with 409.5. They had the #1 ranked offensive line according to PFF, ranked #1 in touchdowns per game, averaging 4 touchdowns per game. And Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, I think we can easily say they have the best running back duo in tandem in the league. They also ranked 4th in third down conversion in the league, 3rd in red scoring touchdown percentage. I mean, just across the charts, this team was dynamic, explosive, terrifying. Whatever adjective you want to apply to the Detroit Lions for the 2024 season, they were that. And they were the favorites. But we all saw what happened in the divisional round against the Washington Commanders. The Commanders went up to Detroit against the #1 seed, walked in their trap and took over their trap and won 45-31 and made it to the NFC Championship game, where a lot of people were expecting and longing to see a matchup between the Detroit Lions and the Philadelphia Eagles in the conference championship game. Reality struck in and the Lions were upsetted being the #1 overall seed, and a lot of factors played into that. I will say one thing that we can talk ad nauseum throughout this video about, but really I'll just keep it concise with. We have to talk about how the Detroit Lions had 20 different starters on defense in the 2024 season. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. We all know the most notable with Aiden Hutchinson fracturing his tibia/fibula against the Dallas Cowboys missing this season. He was on pace to become the defensive player of the year last year. I mean, I think that goes without saying. And with him returning this year, I think that's going to be a huge boost to the defense and overall keeping that continuity, trying to establish really a similar scheme. But we all know that Aaron Glenn, who was a defensive coordinator of the Lions, is now the head coach of the New York Jets. They're going to be trying to improve their philosophy defensively under new defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard, who's formerly the linebackers coach. But Aiden Hutchinson wasn't the only person that was injured last season. Alan McNeil dealt with an ACL injury. Mekhi Wingo, Carlton Davis, Khalil Dorsey, Malcolm Rodriguez, Ennis Rickenstraw Jr., and Mickey Robertson, Alex Anzalone, who ended up returning later with that big covering that he had on his forearm, but he came back very rapidly, but he thugged it out and ended up being a huge catalyst for the defense. But another player like a Marcus Davenport was injured too as well, and Milifanu dealt with injuries. So this defense was ravished, and we all know that their offense was probably, we can just say straight up by those evidence of stats, but as a total offense perspective, the Lions had the best offense in the league. But with their defense being so ravished, it made them vulnerable against opposing offenses, and we saw that only really in the regular season once, playing against the Buffalo Bills when the Bills won that high scoring game 48-42 over the Detroit Lions. But then that was on full display when the Washington Commanders won a divisional round game against the Lions. So how do the Lions get back to not only where they were in the 23-24 season, making the NFC Championship game, but getting further, making it to the Super Bowl and winning their first Super Bowl in franchise history? Well, it's twofold. Replacing coordinators is never easy, and when you're a team like the Detroit Lions, the type of success that they've had the past couple of seasons, they knew that reality was inevitable. Aaron Glenn leaving to become the head coach after being their former defensive coordinator, but with them having the #1 offense in the league, really one of the best offenses in the past couple of seasons, Ben Johnson now being the head coach of the Chicago Bears, their former offensive coordinator, it's going to take a lot to really not only replicate that success that they had, but build onto it and try to really take the next step to make and win the Super Bowl. Their new offensive coordinator, John Morton, he had spent some time with the Lions beforehand, being a senior offensive assistant. Now stepping into this role as offensive coordinator, he's going to have to adjust a system that was familiarized with the cores of a Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, other players of that nature, to try to really tweak it and make it his own, but also try to make it even more dynamic. And that's going to be a tall task, but do I think it's certainly possible? Yes, because the personnel is still in place. Coaching certainly does matter in the NFL, don't get me wrong, it for sure does. I think that really you make the argument that out of all sports, coaching in the NFL and football matters the most and makes the biggest difference. But when you have those same guys, a Jared Goff going into his 10th season, he started in the Super Bowl game with the Rams before, has had deep playoff runs with not only them but with the Lions, as we saw in 2023. And Jahmyr Gibbs, who you can make the argument with him, Saquon, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, players of that nature. Jahmyr Gibbs can make the argument that he's the best running back in the league. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brown, a top 5 to 10 receiver in the league. Sam Laporta up there in the top 10 conversation for tight ends as well too. They have the personnel to still be very dangerous and scary. And oh, I might add, the best right tackle in football in Penei Sewell on the offensive line. And overall, I think their offensive line is a big reason why they will still be not only able to replicate the success that they had, but even build further upon it. According to PFF though, in the 2025 season, they're projecting the Lions to have a little drop off, being the 13th ranked offensive line in the league. I can see that, but with some of their continuity, coaching, things of that nature too, I think that they'll still probably be a top 10 unit. But the reason that PFF has them slipping to being just short of a top 10 offensive line is because they lost their 3-time All-Pro center Frank Ragnow to retirement, and Kevin Zilter signed a 1-year, $9 million deal with the Tennessee Titans as he served as right guard for the Detroit Lions. Now he'll be in that role for the Tennessee Titans, trying to protect the Cam Ward and rebuild things over there. So they're for sure gonna have to retool that offensive line and tweak it somewhat, but I still think that they can have the potential to be a dominant offensive line. They now have their center Graham Glasgow, who's gonna be starting at center, so we'll see how much of a difference that's gonna make. But whenever you lose a player like a Frank Ragnow, who's one of the best offensive linemen in the league, not only centers but linemen overall in the league, is gonna take a hit. But the rapport that Jared Goff has hopefully formed with a Glasgow will go a long way in checks the line of scrimmage and things of that nature too, adjusting to different coverages and defense. So I think that they'll be okay there. But really for me, their weapons is where it all starts and ends for the Detroit Lions, because they have a plethora and arguably the best weapons in the NFL across all 32 teams. Let's start with the Jahmyr Gibbs going into his 3rd NFL season. His first 2 years were absolutely dynamic, and like I said, he's probably a top 5 running back in the league, and that comes with him sharing reps with a player like a David Montgomery, even though Montgomery did miss some time last year in 2024. But let's look at the stats throughout Jahmyr Gibbs' past couple of seasons. So overall, in his first 2 seasons, he had 432 carries for over 2,300 rushing yards, averaging 5.5 yards per carry and 26 rushing touchdowns. With that though, specifically last year, he had 250 carries for over 1,400 rushing yards, averaging nearly 6 yards per carry and 16 rushing touchdowns. Also, he was dynamic in the receiving game, having 52 receptions for 517 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. So Jahmyr Gibbs had 20 total touchdowns, had over 1,900 all-purpose yards. Just an absolute dog who can not only tote the rock, but is very dynamic in the receiving game and very reliable to a Jared Goff in that offense. Is going to be a great weapon. And we talked about their new offensive coordinator, John Morton. He's talked ad nauseum about potentially using Jahmyr Gibbs even more in the receiving game, and that's going to be just an added benefit for this offense going forward. And with his other running mate in David Montgomery, he missed some games, playing 14 games last year, but he was still very effective, having 185 carries for 775 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns, and also added 341 receiving yards. That's just 2 weapons right there, with around nearly 3,000 total yards between 2 backs. And Montgomery, he is getting older. He's 28 years old. Jahmyr Gibbs is 23 years old. So you can make the argument that Gibbs, his time is coming to where he's going to be the #1 running back all right by himself and be taking most of the carries. But while this duo is standing strong and still working off of each other, it just provides another added element to make things easier for Jared Goff to really be multiple and play action and get the football to guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, and players of that nature. But speaking of those receiving threats, I talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit earlier. I do believe he's around a top 5 receiver in the league. Plays a little bit differently. A very physical receiver who isn't scared to block at all and is very tough. Really embodies that Detroit culture and nature, and you can use him in the slot, you can use him outside. He's very versatile, and throughout his past really 3 seasons, but really since he's been in the league, he's been proven to be one of the best receivers in the league. Has had 3 consecutive 1,000+ yard receiving seasons. Specifically in 2023, his best yet, where he had 119 receptions for over 1,500 receiving yards and 10 receiving touchdowns, averaging essentially 13 yards per reception. Last year, the yards were a little bit off, but still he was equally effective, having 115 receptions for over 1,200 receiving yards and 12 receiving touchdowns, averaging 11 yards per reception. Maybe less yards, yes, but he still had a couple of more touchdowns and was utilized well in that offense. And you look at the wide receiver 2 for the Detroit Lions and the Jamison Williams, who's looking to get paid soon after this season for sure. He's coming off of his best season in his 3rd year in 2024. Played the most games that he has in his career, as in 2022 he only played 6 games and 12 games in 2023. Last year he had 58 receptions for 1,001 receiving yards, averaging 17.3 yards per reception and 7 receiving touchdowns. That ratio of yards, receptions, and average yards per reception just shows the type of explosive weapon that he is, because him and Jared Goff connected for 7 touchdowns for more than 30 yards, just showing the type of range that he has, being able to beat opposing defensive backs in his route running and really just being able to be a burner at that receiver position. And that's perfect for complementing a player like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a different type of receiver, but it just flows well overall to have some added versatility in that receiving room. And then I'd be remiss not to talk about Sam Laporta a little bit more. It's honestly crazy that the Lions were able to get both Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta both in the same year in the 2023 NFL draft, but they were able to pull it off, and they were instant impact players when they stepped in their rookie seasons, and they've been both dynamic. And talking about Sam Laporta, last year, even though though his yardage was a little bit off compared to his rookie season, because in his rookie year he had 86 receptions for 889 receiving yards and 10 receiving touchdowns, he was still a huge factor for that offense in 2024, having 60 receptions for 726 receiving yards and 7 receiving touchdowns. And he's great in 11 and 12 personnel, loves to get in the trenches and block and create lanes for guys like a Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery to run through, and really embraces the physicality that this Detroit Lions team has had under Dan Campbell, who has revitalized his culture and really imprinted his impact on this team since becoming the head coach in 2021. And so yeah, but like I talked about, this offense is super dynamic. I know people may expect their offensive line to take a little bit of dip, and maybe their offense overall to take a dip, but I'm not certainly seeing that, and I'll expand on why even more. I think that they're still going to be one of the best teams in not only the NFC but in the league. But it is certainly a question that is warranted to ask, because when you lose both of your coordinators, there's going to be an adjustment period. But I still think that this team has a chance to do a lot of special things going into the 2025 season and beyond. But with that being said though, guys, before we further talk about the Detroit Lions and how scary they can be in the 2025 NFL season, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter /X at Swaggy Russ, and TikTok at Swaggy Russ 2 for shorts, reels, and a lot of different content like that. This is the first video in the NFC North. Next team that we'll be talking about after this is the Green Bay Packers, so stay tuned for that. Really looking forward to talking about all 4 teams in this division, because the NFC North is going to be one of the best divisions in the NFL in the 2025 season, so stay tuned for the rest of it. But with that being said, let's talk about why the Detroit Lions are still the NFL's scariest team in this 2025 NFL season. Throughout the past couple of years, there's been a conversation about how truly good Jared Goff is, and to me it's clear he's a top 10 quarterback in this league. Look at his stats the past couple of years. In 2024 in particular, he had over 4,600 passing yards for 37 passing touchdowns and 12 interceptions, having a QBR of 68.4 and a 112 quarterback rating. And in 2023, when they went 12-5 that season and made the conference championship game, he threw for a little bit shy of 4,600 passing yards, but also had 30 passing touchdowns and 12 interceptions, having a 97.9 quarterback rating and a 61.1 QBR. And just efficient, has been in great spots to get the ball to his playmakers like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, and both of his running backs in the backfield, and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And I think that's going to be on full display this year. Yes, it's going to be different without Ben Johnson being the offensive coordinator, but I think John Morton being the new offensive coordinator there, but also previously being with the Detroit Lions under Dan Campbell, is going to help be able to tweak some things in the scheme, maybe from a verbiage standpoint and things of that nature too with play calling. But I think that Jared Goff is a very cerebral and intelligent quarterback that's going to be able to continue to make different checks at the line of scrimmage, audibles, and protections for things of that nature to make sure that this offense is very dynamic and very unpredictable. And we're going to see that on full display, I believe, going into this 2025 season. Furthermore, Jared Goff finished 5th in MVP voting, having a phenomenal season, leading the league's #1 offense in the Detroit Lions. You know, another point that people like to make about Jared Goff is whenever he sees pressure and things of that nature too, or has to go against a blitz, that some things can get very shaky. He turns over the ball and things of that nature. He quickly changed that narrative though last season in 2024, as he had a 77.8 completion rate, which ranked first in the NFL against all blitzes, and a 118.8 passer rating when getting blitzed. So that really just killed that narrative, to be honest with you. And then I don't know if you guys remember in the game last season against the Seattle Seahawks, when Jared Goff completed all 18 of his 18 passing attempts, leading the Lions to a 42-29 win over the Seattle Seahawks. That just shows the efficiency that he plays with and how in rhythm Jared Goff gets with this offense that has a plethora of weapons like I listed before. But also I want to key in on a new weapon that'll be a rookie in this season at the wide receiver 3 spot, and Isaac Tesla, a player who a lot of people aren't talking about right now, but I think throughout the season and as we continue to see more of this new 2025 version of the Detroit Lions in a new offense under John Morton, Tesla is going to be utilized and very paramount to the success of this team in the receiving game, being the wide receiver 3 now after trading a receiver like a Tim Patrick to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now Tesla's 2023 and 2024 stats don't necessarily fly off the screens in his tenure with Arkansas, but I will say though that in preseason and his tape really just shows how dynamic he can be used as a slot receiver. And in 2024 he did have 28 receptions for 545 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns, so not the highest amount of numbers, but if you look at that reception to receiving yards ratio, that's averaging nearly 20 yards per reception. He's an explosive weapon, and that's perfect for this offense to add another weapon that can blow the top off of a defense like they already have in Jamison Williams, but now adding Isaac Tesla to that. Yeah, that's a really good weapon to have, just to give Jared Goff another piece to be scary and dangerous in this offense. I think he'll be an absolute steal, being drafted in the 3rd round. But then moving on to another rookie that I love that the Detroit Lions drafted in the 1st round with the 28th pick overall, in a Tyleek Williams, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. Been really one of the most consistent players in college football throughout his 4 seasons at Ohio State, and last year that was on full display. He had 46 total tackles, 8 TFLs, and 2.5 sacks. But even if if you look throughout his other years, in 2023 he had 3 sacks for 53 tackles and 10 TFLs. A little less production in 2022, having 21 total tackles, 3 TFLs and 1 sack, but even in his freshman season, he stepped on the scene playing at a high level, having 16 total tackles that year, 7 TFLs and 5 sacks, the highest in his tenure at Ohio State in his freshman season. So I think that he's going to provide great ability on the defensive line to help stop the run, but also be a pass rush threat getting to the quarterback to help this defensive line in Detroit that really struggled after being ravaged by injuries in the 2024 season. And I talk frequently about their defense throughout the video, but when you really get into it now, with them returning a majority of their starters now after, like I said, the injury ravaged season last year, Aiden Hutchinson being there is going to be huge. Ricky Tyler Williams, I think he's going to have a great impact on the defensive line. Then they have DJ Reader, Marcus Davenport, Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, Derek Barnes, Terrion Arnold, who was amazing in his rookie season, having 60 total tackles and 6.5 TFLs. Was really consistent in that Aaron Glenn defense last year, and he's going to look to improve going into a sophomore season. And then you also look at Brian Branch, who I think is easily one of the best safeties in the league last year, who was very impactful. Really his past couple of years being in the league, but in 2024 having 109 total tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 4 interceptions. And even in his rookie year, he had 3 interceptions and 74 total tackles and a sack and a forced fumble as well too. Branch is just continuing to get better and better, and going into his 3rd season, I think that he's going to have a chance to be an all-pro this upcoming year. And Kirby Joseph as well too. Since he was drafted in the 2022 NFL draft, Kirby Joseph has really been the definition of a ball hawk at the safety position. And last year, he led the league in interceptions with 9 total individually, earning him to being a first-team All-Pro last year. In his rookie year, he had 4 picks. 2023 had 4 picks, and that really just all came full circle last year as he had 9 interceptions, alongside of having 83 total tackles, similar to his numbers in 2022 and 2023, when both of those seasons he had 82 tackles too. So between Brian Branch, Terrion Arnold, and Kirby Joseph being in the secondary, that just bodes well for this defense even more to have one of the best units in the league, not only from a defensive line standpoint, but in their secondary as well collectively. That great success the Lions had in the 2024 season earned them having the 3rd difficult schedule for the 2025 season, as they'll be facing 9 teams in the 2025 season that made the playoffs in the 2024 season. So if anything, that's just going to be an added bonus to the Lions, depending on the type of success that they have this year, showing that they've been battle tested going against real competition. And it starts off when week 1 going against the Green Bay Packers, who just traded for Micah Parsons in a blockbuster deal. That's going to be a crazy game, man. The Green Bay Packers and Lions are always entertaining, and I know that the Lions, they swept the Packers last season in both matchups, but it's going to be different now. I was ready to say that the Lions, that they're going to win the division again for a 3rd consecutive year, but even before this trade happened, I thought it was still going to be very competitive for them to win an NFC North, and that applies now, especially with Micah Parsons being on their rival in the Green Bay Packers. So it's going to be intriguing to see that first matchup off rip against Green Bay, albeit at home, so that does help. But just in general, though, that's going to be a very entertaining game. Then moving on forward from that, they'll be playing against their former offensive coordinator in week 2 against the Chicago Bears, with now head coach Ben Johnson, their former offensive coordinator, being the head coach there. That should be a game that they should want to dominate and be up for, but Ben Johnson is going to want to win that game as well. And then you look at week 3, they play against the Baltimore Ravens, and a lot of people don't really remember this because the Lions were so successful last year in 2024. They had a great year in 2023, going 12-5. But when the Ravens last played against the Lions in the 2023 season, the Ravens put against the Lions, winning 38-6. That was a crazy matchup too. So the players on the Lions who were on the team that year should be up for this matchup to prove that that was a fluke and that things would be different if those teams were to ever meet in the Super Bowl, because what that told me that year is that if the Lions and Ravens were playing the Super Bowl, that the Ravens would dominate. But we'll see, because I think this Lions team is even better 2 years out after that matchup. So moving on forward to the schedule, though, they play against the Browns in week 4, the Bengals in week 5. Well, that should be a really good game. The Chiefs in week 6, the last time they played against the Chiefs was week 1 in 2023 when they upsetted the Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium. And that'll also be on the road too again, so that'll be a good game. Week 7, they play against the Bucks, and the Bucks were actually one of the 2 teams to beat the Detroit Lions in the regular season last year, so I think that'll be a fun matchup at home as well. Then week 8 is their bye week, and I think it comes in a good time because they have a 3-week stretch that's going to be really pivotal to potential playoff seeding in the NFC. In week 9, they have a matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. Week 10, they play against the Commanders on the road, and then in week 11, they play against the Philadelphia Eagles on the road. So those will be some tests there for sure, and also playing against the Vikings in week 9, that'll be a game in the division that's going to count in terms of not only winning the NFC, but winning the division in the NFC North. So that'll have some stakes. In week 12, they play against the Giants. Week 13, they play against Green Bay for a second time. Week 14, they'll play against the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. And then week 15, Jared Goff will be playing against his former team in the Los Angeles Rams on the road in LA. That'll have a lot of storylines behind that matchup. And then the final 3 weeks, they play the Steelers in week 16, the Vikings in week 17, and then the Bears in week 18 for a second time. Looking at that schedule right there, I can see the Lions really having a similar season to like what they had in 2023, being 12-5 or even 13-4. I don't see them going 15-2 again, just because they have some of those AFC juggernauts that they're playing against, like the Chiefs, like the Ravens, and teams of that nature. And they're playing against the Eagles as well too this year. That should be a really good game. And the Bucks, they're playing against 9 teams that made the playoffs in the 2024 season, so that's going to be good for them being battle tested and things of that nature. But I just see this Lions team dominating and being great again. But in terms of winning the division, like I said, Micah Parsons being on the Packers, that makes it an intriguing storyline to have. I can't just definitively say that I would pick the Lions to win. I think it's really a toss-up between them and the Packers, and no offense to the Vikings, and I'll talk about the Vikings when I have their season preview in a few days. But I think the NFC North this year comes down to between the Lions and the Green Bay Packers. These teams are too talented. Both of these teams are so talented, and they really both have Super Bowl windows now, and we saw how explosive that the Lions offense but team overall is and can be. It's just about them putting things together and having overall execution, because we saw them get out executed in that matchup against the Commanders, and really they got punched in the mouth and weren't able to fight back and lost that game. But I believe this year the Lions, they're gonna be owning that game in that matchup on the chin, trying to learn from it. And I know that they have a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, John Morton and Kelvin Shepard, but this team is gonna be rejuvenated, really trying to prove the haters wrong, trying to send a message on why the personnel that they still have is the best in the league, and why they are the scariest team in the NFL going into the 2025 season. I do believe that they are the scariest team in the NFL, or at least one of them for sure. But stay tuned next for my following season preview, the second in the NFC North, where we'll be talking about the Green Bay Packers, and that's one that you won't want to miss at all. It's ironic because I already planned on posting the Packers season preview after the Lions, but this Micah Parsons news actually just came in perfect timing, so that'll just be able to play off of that. But that's crazy, man. We're gonna talk more about that in that video, so stay tuned for that. But this NFC North division is gonna be great this year. It was amazing last year with 3 teams making the playoffs. I can see that happening again this year, but like I said, this year I just think it comes down between the Lions and the Packers, and really both of those teams should be feared and are going to be scary in the 2025 season. But I still believe that the Lions are the scariest team in the NFL. With that being said though, guys, let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Do you think that the Detroit Lions are still the scariest team in the NFL? I believe that they still are from a total weapon standpoint, the returning personnel, things to that nature. But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. This is going to be a great season. We're getting closer and closer to being there, guys, and I think this NFC North has a chance to be the best division in football this year. So y'all stay tuned, because it's going to be an amazing season. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter /X at SwaggyRuss, and TikTok at SwaggyRuss2 for shorts, reels, content, all things of that nature, guys. Like I said, next video in the season preview series on the Green Bay Packers, we'll be talking about how they'll look for the 2025 NFL season, and then talking about the Vikings and the Bears, and then for the last division we'll be talking about the AFC North. So stay tuned for that. Definitely love you guys always. Make sure you keep Jesus Christ at the center of your lives always, guys. Know that he has great purpose for you. Know that you matter. You have a lot of great things in store in your life, guys. So y'all keep being blessed, keep being legendary, and y'all have a good one. Peace.